Hello, WordPress Agency Summit. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I'm really thrilled to share at least a bit of my knowledge about Headless WordPress and is this really the future? My name is Maciek Palmowski. I work at Patchstack. Patchstack is a company that you probably might know because we are taking care of security. We are mostly concentrated about finding vulnerabilities inside plugins, themes, and sometimes even core. So if you never heard about Patchstack, you should give it a try. It's a very interesting product. Also, if you would ever like to contact me, you can send me an email to hi@maciekpomorski.dev. But okay, enough about me. Let's talk about headless. First things first, what even is this headless architecture? To start talking about headless, we first have to talk about what is the monolith. So imagine that there is a CMS, in our case WordPress, that has an admin panel in which we can add some data, edit it. So we can, for example, when it comes to WordPress, add posts, edit posts, remove pages, and so on. On the other hand, there is a mechanism that lets us show this data on the front end. In case of WordPress, we are talking about themes, and everything is connected together. So this is one application that has, first of all, a way to edit data and to show it on the front end. This is a monolith. The most simple definition of headless is something like this. So we still have our admin panel in which we can edit our data, and there is a front end somewhere. It can be, let's say, XJS application or an Astro one, or even a Laravel application. It doesn't matter. The most important part is that it needs something to talk with this admin panel, in our case with WordPress. So for this, we need some sort of API. WordPress has a built-in REST API, but also there are plugins that would allow us to use GraphQL. But Rick here was a very wise person because headless, that just sounds like monolith with extra steps. And Rick's really right here. This is a horrible example of headless because it doesn't show any of its strength. It only looks like I said, like a monolith with extra steps. This is a much better example of headless. So imagine that we have our CMS, our WordPress, one WordPress to rule hundreds of websites, because we will have our home website. We'll also have like 100 of our landing pages and even a mobile application. And every time when we'll change something inside of our one WordPress, all the pages will have a proper data. So imagine that every time you will add something to the About Us page, it will change on all the pages. It's really convenient because we don't have to take care of hundreds of separate WordPresses and editing them one by one. It would be a horrible experience, right? With headless, we can do something like this, like one CMS to rule them all. On the other hand, imagine a different scenario. We have our website, but also we have many data sources. So we will have our WordPress for our blog. We will have some database in Notion where we keep, for example, our public appearances. And we'll also have our CRM from which we also are grabbing some kind of data. So all of those data sources are equal and all the data has to land inside of one website. Also, you can imagine connecting this scenario with the one that I showed on the previous. This way, we will start creating some sort of a spider web of connections. But we also have to remember that CMSs doesn't have to be monolith or headless. They can be hybrid too. For example, WordPress, because WordPress at the same time can be a monolith CMS, and also it can be using its APIs to share the data with some other websites. But why? Why everyone is talking about headless so much? Because there was the moment when, like everything, that the headless is the future, we should all switch to headless, and so on and so on. Personally, I think that the reason is very obvious: money. And more of it's kind of a way to change the status quo. Because right now, our market is kind of set. Everyone knows its place. There are bigger companies, there are smaller companies, but in general, nothing changes too much. Thanks to headless, a lot has changed because companies started to offer new types of products, new frameworks start to appear, and so on and so on. So it was kind of a way to break the status quo. We could also find a lot of articles about headless, why it's so amazing, why we should go headless, why headless is the future, and so on and so on. Is it? But I want to already tell you one thing. I do not fully agree with those. Why? Because most of those articles are trying to say that everything that is headless is amazing. That the moment when you switch to headless architecture, when you when you move from monolith WordPress to a headless one, your website will become faster, better, it will rank better in Google, and all other arguments. But the truth is, it's not entirely true. And now I am going to try to show you why it's not that obvious. Let's start with the performance, because this is one of the most popular arguments why we should switch to headless. The moment when you will start using this modern headless approach instead of this old legacy monolith one, your website will be faster, better, and so on. But the truth is, because this is partially true, but very often not because of headless itself, but because of some frameworks, for example, Astro or Next.js, can convert your website into a static one. You know, HTML, CSS, that's it. And the truth is that, yeah, HTML files are, in most cases, much faster than dynamic PHP ones. So this way, yes, our website might become faster, but it's not thanks to going headless, but becoming static. But the truth is, you don't need to change your architecture and rebuild your website to achieve static WordPress. There's a plugin for this. It's called Simply Static. It's that simple. On the other hand, I already showed you that Headless uses APIs, and APIs aren't magically more performant than directly querying the database. That's not true. So the only difference here is that sometimes when we are using the APIs, we are only asking for data that we really need instead of some more bloated plugins that will grab too much data, and that's why it will look like the monolith approach is slower. But in general, headless by itself shouldn't be any more performant than monolith. Another thing is security and maintenance. And let me remind you, I work at Patchstack, so I really know a bit about security. So first of all, one thing that makes headless WordPress a bit more secure is the fact that we are sometimes converting into static. And again, static websites are much more difficult to hack rather than dynamic ones because, well, HTML just is just a static file, it's just an HTML. But on the other hand, even if we are converting our data to static one, there has to be a CMS somewhere. It gives us some opportunities to hide it a bit better, but still, it's somewhere. We still have to take care of it. We still have to update it. We still have to take care of its security. You know, all the strong passwords, making sure that we are granting access only to people who should have this access, and so on and so on. So not much changes. On the other hand, I already show you that when using, quite often we might have more than one environment, right? Because very often we'll be connecting many services. This way we have to take care of more environments rather than just one server. What's also important, because we will be using all those APIs, very often we will be using some keys to authenticate. And now we have to make sure that none of those keys becomes public. Believe me, sometimes it happens. So again, it's not that headless isn't secure or it's hard to maintain. I would just say it's as secure and it requires as much maintenance as most monolith CMSs. Another thing, and this is something that many developers will tell, that yeah, thanks to the moment we switched to headless, everything became much simpler. Well, I don't agree. Again, first of all, if you are used to WordPress, you know that you just install it, you can just push the code and everything works. You don't need any build steps or anything. I mean, sometimes you might have them, and that's okay, but you don't have them. You don't need to have them. With headless, very often, every time you will change content, you will have to rebuild your website. And that's okay. It's just part of the process. But let's not tell that it's simpler. Also, having a build step sometimes will require that you will build some kind of CI/CD pipeline. Some hosting providers will do it for you, but sometimes you may prefer to build it on your own in some applications like, I don't know, GitHub Actions or Buddy or something similar. Also, there are some plugins that won't work out of the box with REST or GraphQL API. Luckily, there are a lot of developers who are filling the gaps and are adding those integrations. But there will be some cases when there won't be any integration, there won't be any add-on plugin to our plugin, and we will either have to build this bridge on our own, or we will have to change our favorite plugin, which is something opposite of approach to developing websites, right? So right now, some of you might think, okay, so this guy is here and he is saying all those horrible things about headless. And yeah, that's true. Right now, I was a bit pessimistic about it. But also, I'm a huge fan of headless, really. And I think there are a lot of reasons to at least give it a try. But for some reasons, most of them aren't the one that are the most popular. Personally, I think that the most important part about going headless is the freedom. Because right now, if we are using WordPress, we are kind of slaves of which technology WordPress choose. So in our case, PHP. And not everyone has to like PHP. I don't know why, because I think PHP is really cool, but still, there are people that think that PHP is horrible and they would prefer to build website in something different. And that's okay. Thanks to headless, we can still have WordPress, and people who are managing the website will still use WordPress as usual, but the developers might build the front end in something totally different. They can use some fancy JavaScript framework like Astro, like Next. They can go with Laravel, or maybe they can even go, I don't know, using Rust or Go. It's up to them. And personally, this is the number one reason why people should choose headless. Another thing is the fact that headless has this approach of replacing parts with ease. Do you remember this the slide where I show you this website that has a blog on WordPress, database on Notion, and some CRM? And the cool part is that we can change the API which we are using, and instead of Notion, we can switch to, for example, Airtable. Both of them have an API, so we just have to change a bit of code here and there, and everything should be working. From WordPress perspective, it's a bit double-edged sword, because at some point we might realize, yeah, we are using WordPress for blogging, but we could use something else. And that's true, we could. But still, this part that we can replace everything that easily is also really cool, because together with the previous thing that I said, that we are no longer tied to a technology, it's really great because we can be much more flexible with our technology stack. Scalability. While I did say that when it comes to performance, headless isn't in any magical way faster than a monolith approach. That's true. But when we are trying to scale WordPress, we have kind of limited amount of things we can do. We can add faster CPUs, more RAM, things like that. With the headless approach, when sometimes we'll be running only some part of on WordPress, there will be this Notion part, there will be some separate CRM, we can scale every element separately. So this gives us much more opportunities to scale everything as we need, which is really cool. And also, let's not forget about the developer experience. Because while WordPress has one of the greatest user experiences, it's really familiar for so many people. I mean, I love training people when it comes to using WordPress websites because there is a huge chance they already know some part of WordPress. So I'm just showing them a few details here, a few details there, and that's it. On the other hand, when it comes to developer experience, WordPress developer experience is much worse than, for example, Laravel's or Astro's or Next. So developers will prefer to use other technologies rather than WordPress. Thanks to Headless, we can have a cookie and eat a cookie because our users will still be using WordPress and our developers will have brand new, shiny JavaScript framework or whatever they want. And that's really cool. So, right now, I already told you about some not so great things about Headless. I also showed you some amazing stuff about Headless. So, guessing that some of you might now start thinking, okay, maybe we should give this headless approach a try, because why not? There are a few things you should keep in mind before even trying. First of all, and this is one of the most important things. Headless is just an architecture. That's it. Headless won't solve all of your problems. Headless isn't better or worse. It's just an architecture. In some cases, it will work better. In some cases, it will just add more problems. So, if someone will tell you that, yeah, switch to headless because it's better, no, it's not. It's different. And sometimes it is better, but it's only different. And it's just an architecture. Remember, it's not a silver bullet. As you already might seen along the way, headless will work better when we'll have the more complicated stack, the bigger team, or even more teams working on our products. Because using headless for a simple website like a blog or something, I mean, you can do it and it's totally fine because it's always a good way to experiment in some way, but it won't show its true power. Headless is really great when we are talking about really big applications with many people where there are many things connected. For simple websites, not so much. And also, this is a very important thing because sometimes, as agency owners or developers, we think about CMSs in a bit different way, right? Because we just use the right CMS for the job. And very often we kind of don't care about people using it. And that's a huge mistake. And that's one of the things where headless really shines. This is the thing that I kind of mentioned already, that thanks to headless, we can preserve the user experience for people that are working with our CMS every day. Right? So if they are used to WordPress, let's not change anything for them. Let's just give them WordPress. So they can constantly use it and don't worry about that some agency swoops in and say, yeah, look, there is a better CMS, you should change, you will be happy. No, that's not true. There will be many people in the team that won't be that happy about any change. So if they're used to WordPress, let's give them WordPress. On the other hand, thanks to headless, our development team can use whatever they want, but still people who are using it every day will keep the experience. So, is headless the future? Classic response: it depends. It really depends on when you are planning to use it, how, what is your product, what is your team, what is your strategy for hiring people. A lot of questions, a lot of it depends. But the truth is that you might not need headless at all, and that's totally fine. Never think that if you aren't jumping on this bandwagon, this headless bandwagon, you are worse or you are missing something. No, not at all. Like I said, it's just an architecture, it's just a different way of creating software. It's not better, not worse. So if you feel that headless is not for you, it's totally fine. On the other hand, there are already a lot of companies that are using it. I mean, TechCrunch, The Times, NASA. So yeah, they are all using headless already, and that's okay. But this doesn't mean that you also have to. Don't worry. Okay, that's it. I hope that I helped you a bit with explaining what headless is and is it something you should give a try. If you have any questions, I'll be there on YouTube trying to answer all your questions. And if you have more questions, you can always reach me out on Twitter. And also you can submit to my newsletter. I share quite a lot of interesting things also about headless. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure being here. Have a great day, and I hope you'll enjoy all the other talks at this WordPress Agency Summit. So have a great day.